Hello again, everybody. This is Craig Evans of Autism Hangout, and thank you for tuning in to this next installment in Key Learnings of Autism Thought Leaders. And with me today, my guest is Dr. Digby Tantam. Dr. Tantam is clinical professor of psychotherapy at the University of Sheffield. He is an honorary visiting senior research fellow at the University of Cambridge, and he's an honorary consultant psychiatrist at the Sheffield Health and Care Trust. Now, he also founded the first ever mental health clinic for adults with autistic spectrum disorder, and this was back in 1980. He's an international expert on Asperger syndrome. He's published numerous articles and books. He's given speeches all over the world to invited lectures of mostly parents and professionals. But Autism Hangout, I'd like to have you welcome, please, Dr. Digby Tantam. Welcome, Dr. Tantam.
Hi, welcome, Craig.
Well, it's really nice to have you here, and I've learned of you from your book through Jessica Kingsley. First, congratulations on having such an excellent publisher. But your book, this one in particular that we're going to talk about today, is called Can the World Afford Autistic Spectrum Disorder? Now, that's a really provocative title, and actually that's what I'd like to start with. Would you like to explain what that means?
Sure. The title is about perhaps deliberately provocative, and of course, if you read it quickly, you might think that I'm suggesting that the world can't afford people with autistic spectrum disorder, and that's been the position for quite a long while. People have said, no, we can't afford to take on this new syndrome, mental health spending is already very tight, and so on. And in England, for a long time, people have said, well, we just don't have the funds to help adults with autistic spectrum disorder. So there is a kind of sneaky reference in the title to that position. But actually, I'm using the word afford in a particular way used by a psychologist called Gibson. And it's about being able to making a place for. So can the world make a place for people with autistic spectrum disorders? And that suggests to me the idea that I wanted to convey in the book, that actually people aren't making a place at the moment. It's not that people are choosing not to make a place. We've just made a world which doesn't give a place to people with autistic spectrum disorders. Yeah. And it's time we did make a place for them, because actually, and this is the end of the book, we desperately need them. And yes, we maybe need people with autistic spectrum disorders more and more as time goes on.
Well, you are a world-renowned expert in this. You've studied it as long as anybody that's been out there. Your book deals a great deal with trying to distinguish some of the differences between people that are on the spectrum and neurotypicals. And there were two things in particular that I noticed in your book that I'd like to have you talk a bit more about. One is what you call the gaze, and the other is called the interbrain connection. And I'd like to have you address those in any order that you choose to.
Okay, well, let me talk about the interbrain connection first of all. It's something that I'm getting increasingly preoccupied with. And one of the examples I give in my book is what happens when you're walking along a street and you come across a bunch of people who are looking upwards. And I say, and I hope this is true not just of me but of everybody, that there is a terrible tendency to stop and look up yourself. And actually you justify that yourself because you think, well, maybe there's something really important I need to see. But even if you're in a great hurry, it's quite hard to suppress that urge to look up. And I say, well, that's really an instance of the fact that all of us have this automatic responses to other people's gaze and their facial expressions, which mean that we just simply react to other people. We look at their eyes, we look at where their eyes are looking, we make inferences about what they're looking at, and we pick up on their facial expressions and automatically respond to them. Now, I think if that's a novel thing in my book, it's because I'm saying that's a thing about the brain. That's just the way our brains are. And in evolutionary terms, we've had to sort of fight against that, because otherwise we'd end up just being herd animals. So we'd have to create a way of suppressing that and make a space for us to develop minds and individuality, which of course we have. But there is always a kind of slight tension there, and The tension is expressed obviously in a crowd when people's minds disappear and they just follow their brains, and everybody does the same thing, and it's sometimes destructive, sometimes very, adulatory. It comes actually in bullying, which I think perhaps you might be asking me about in a minute, where we just, without thinking, automatically round on people who are different from us and try and make them more the same. But a lot of the time we try and suppress that, and we try and think our way through to understanding other people through what's sometimes called theory of mind. Now, my argument in the book is that people with autism or Asperger syndrome have what I call a low bandwidth connection. So it's not like they're completely detached from other people, but their brains aren't wired up in the same way, so they don't receive these signals as strongly. Which means that in a lot of ways, people with Asperger syndrome are often very original, as Asperger syndrome said. They have to sort of discover the world completely for themselves. They don't just go along with everybody else. But it's a terrible price you have to pay because you don't know quite where you fit in. From day naught, most of us just carry on doing the same old things that our parents do because we're just following along in their footsteps willy-nilly. We can't help ourselves. But if you're a kind of original person, not connected to the interbrain, you have to work out your place by thinking about it, by observing people. So there's quite a heavy emotional price to pay for that, and you sometimes miss out on important influences in social development too. And if it's very, very severe, you miss out on language. Of course, that has very significant implications of its own.
What would be your key learnings that you would say you've found through your career?
A lot of the difficulty that people with autism or Asperger syndrome have is that they have emotional problems. And those come as much, if not more, from the way people are treated by others than from some sort of deficit in themselves. So the emotional problems are ones that the rest of society creates, not going out of their way, not because the rest of us are morally bad, but just because that abrasive fit between somebody who doesn't quite fit in and the rest of the world who are all kind of hanging together causes immense emotional difficulties. Number two, take non-verbal communication seriously. There are millions and millions of books about how to influence people which talk about, how to use gesture and how to sit close to people and so on, how to get up with girls. This isn't taking non-verbal communication seriously. This is kind of superficiality. What I think is that we need to look at this whole idea that we're involuntarily connected with each other. We need to take that seriously, and we need to understand it more and study it more and understand its implications, because it's such a powerful thing and yet it's curiously overlooked. Well, I suppose the third is about bullying. Bullying isn't simply a matter of bad people, bullies who we need to eradicate, or anti-bullying strategies we can use in schools. I think these are important, but the issue I think we need to take much more seriously is that bullying is a deep part of our nature, that something about the interbrain means that we actually do, without thinking, without consciously thinking, we do go out of our way to try and make people like ourselves, bring them onto the interbrain connection. And if they can't, as people with Asperger syndrome or autism can't, then we can be unthinkingly or sometimes deliberately cruel.
Dr. Tantam, thank you for your book. How can people find more information out about you and your book?
Well, of course they can buy it, which would be great. They can go to a variety of websites that I have. Perhaps the one that is the best one for them to look at is called www.dilemmas.org. I'm also started a blog on Psychology Today, which deals with some of these issues, so they can follow that.
Thank you for taking time out of your schedule today to talk to us at Autism Hangout, and hopefully we'll have you back again soon sometime.
Well, thank you for the invitation, Craig. I've enjoyed it.
And thank you, Autism Hangout listeners. I'll be back again soon with another Key Learnings of Autism Thought Leaders.